concurrent with actual prosperity, to the full extent of our capacities. Until we have such public unity as will certainly prevail over a denial of representation, itself knowingly condemned to prevail only so far, by no more than purposed concerted evasion. These facts thus convict and prevail over the present treason. Given the irrefutable arguments of a 40-year-plus-old proof of singular solution, then, thus because the present obfuscation of our currency reflects upon all the destructive events we now haplessly witness, this program on mathematically perfected economy and absolute consensual representation dissects the processes of the obfuscation which has been imposed upon us by in fact purposely evading assent. Necessarily, we unravel the fundamental root causes of the present obfuscation's many manifestations, because a diligent people, who make themselves capable of self-determination, must understand how, all along its relatively brief road to inevitable terminal failure, the present purposed corruption of money itself engenders the destructive inertias and injustices we suffer under it. There is no such thing as freedom without justice, as much as there is no such thing as justice where there is any exception to justice. Because if they are to exist, liberty or freedom are necessarily prescribed by limits which cannot infringe upon the equal liberties of others. A proper definition and existence of those limits, no more and no less, is justice. Peace or absence of strife, then, only exists where the limits of freedom are observed and upheld without exception. Thus, by nothing less than understanding with necessary certainty the causes of the very events around us, causes which the perpetrators, of course, hope we never understand. We understand how and why all free and just people will readily unite, without even the least hesitation, in a fact of one monetary solution, because mathematically perfected economy is the only thing which can establish, sustain, and preserve the justice which is always, always, always incumbent upon the very idea of actual freedom itself. Justice, of course, cannot exist, then, where unjustifiable powers are endowed to a given few, to the destruction of liberty, right, and justice for others. Our further discussion and quest for absolute consensual representation, then, is indispensable to our inevitable establishment of actual monetary solution amidst a vast global usurpation of representation, so dedicated, as we see every day, to persisting in the crimes of usury. To put these inseparable propositions of mathematically perfected economy and absolute consensual representation into perspective, then, we must understand the general history of my 40-plus years of advocating mathematically perfected economy. For unless we understand that we will never establish actual monetary solution, so long as we leave solution to perpetrators of the crimes against us, we will never understand how vital it is that we unite by the certitude of a sufficiently disciplined people, who can only make themselves capable and fit to determine their own self-rule. I habitually repeat this introduction to this material in introducing this program then, because a deserving humanity will inevitably establish mathematically perfected economy. Amidst a truly free, just humanity, mathematically perfected economy is inevitable. The little further we must tread to accomplish that indispensable object is no more than to master the few elementary issues upon which, from the present division, we unite over the indispensable obligation to establish mathematically perfected economy and absolute consensual representation. Even the first of these programs sufficiently covered the issues before us, that we might sufficiently compel each other to understand. But we have made ourselves our own worst enemy, because this vital thesis of one and one only monetary solution is now the most imitated, plagiarized, and compromised monetary concept in history. The compromisation of irrefutable arguments of one solution is the worst thing we can do to ourselves, for in the least it destroys both the unity and the only tools by which we can prevail. As much as the material before you was the first online monetary reform presence, so too in its ever unrefuted proof of one and one solution only, it likewise was the only necessary monetary reform presence. Yet its original proof has now been vastly compromised by literally millions of ever unqualified permutations, offered up by 11th hour imitators who, contrary to authoring the only solution which they have loosely imitated, instead deviated from the only pattern which engenders solution for far lesser purposes. In 1979, I provided the Reagan campaign with mathematic proofs establishing how Reagan's unqualified proposition for solving price inflation and balancing the federal budget would only fail, proving therefore that Reagan could only accomplish these objects, and that Reagan could only truly avoid the present inevitable failure by adopting mathematically perfected economy. In 1983 and 4, after the proofs I had provided were already blatantly validated by massive manifestations of the terminal process I had conclusively explained, I further provided computer models to the Reagan administration, which models remain to this day in their intended capability of actually calculating the maximum possible lifespan of any purported economy subject to interest. These models projected in 1983 and 4 then that the present implementation of the globally imposed systems of exploitation would engender their terminal failure at approximately 2010 AD. It is the validity of these original propositions of terminal failure and singular solution, then, for which my work is now so plagiarized, to our ever greater discredit and division. Because Reagan, like Ford and Carter before him, failed to engage in the proven necessary establishment of mathematically perfected economy. My copyright and trademark theses were posted to online bulletin boards, fully documenting the cause of inevitable failure and prospects of immediate solution. The original online presences of my work, in fact, then, preceded the 1993 advent of the formal Internet by a decade. I have provided these proofs of inevitable failure and singular solution, in fact, to every conducive candidate and to every U.S. president since and including Gerald Ford. The present Obama administration, in fact, returned a proposition of mathematically perfected economy requested by Obama campaign personnel without even opening it. Yet, of course, unless anyone can prove more than one actual solution for no more than inflation and deflation even, and unless that elementary, singular possible solution is likewise even possible under the present purposed obfuscation of the currency, which of course it is not, then the only reasonable deduction from the return of such a vital proposition is that the Obama administration, like every preposterous pretender before them who refused to engage in mathematically perfected economy, knows itself that it can only rely upon evasion faced with irrefutable arguments which cannot be invalidated. That evasion, so consistent with all the evasion before and surrounding it, is the very testament how readily we can win our rights to mathematically perfected economy and absolute consensual representation by no more than the unity of good people. In 1979, some 5 years prior to providing computer models, which so accurately projected the present failure by no more than replicating the process of maintaining a vital circulation under the present unjustified obfuscation of the currency, I provided the Reagan campaign with a proof of a singular prescription for lawfully and legitimately transforming any purported banking system into mathematically perfected economy, not only immediately, but even virtually without cost. Thus my original proof of one mathematically perfected economy long ago invalidated every permutation of recent 11th hour plagiarists and imitators. There is one and one only mathematically perfected or actual economy. And there will always be one and one only mathematically perfected economy. Because in fact, there is one and one only integral solution for the category faults of inflation, deflation, and maladisposition, of systemic manipulation of the cost or value of money or property, and of inherent, irreversible, and therefore terminal multiplication of artificial indebtedness by interest. It is my work and my ever persistent arguments against all contestants which established the now broadly recognized, if still little understood fact, that money cannot be subject to interest. Countless pretended authorities hope to imitate Authoring's solution now by proposing the misbegotten and exceedingly flawed concept of spending money into circulation, or purported non-credit money. It is my work which established long ago, nonetheless, and it is my persisting arguments against these imitators too, which invalidates these unqualified, imitating propositions. You can't even argue wrongly